welcome to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we're going to be studying Judges chapter 17. And we've come to the end of the book of Judges where we're talking about individual named judges who kind of ruled over or protected or uh, kind of retrieved Israel from enemies when they would fall into idol worship, or they would fall into slavery to these wicked nations that were around them because of their unfaithfulness to God. God would send a specific person to bring them out of that when they had repented. And Samson is the last of those. And once we move into this next section, we're going to see a period of time where Israel is doing, you'll see this phrase over and over again. There was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. For the rest of the book, this entire time, you're going to see this come about, and it really gives us a picture not only of Israel under the judges, but what happens when left to their own devices, and we get a kind of a detailed look because we go into the lives of specific people who are living during this time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here in verse 1. It says, "There was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said unto his mother, The 1100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, about which you cursed and spake also in my ears about, behold, the silver is with me, I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be you of Yahweh, my son." And so the story starts off with this guy named Micah, and his mother had 1100 shekels of silver. She had 1100 coins or whatever, which is a lot of money. I did not bother to research how much that would necessarily be in our time, but understand from our story with Samson, every lord of the Philistines was going to give Delilah 1100 shekels of silver per lord to betray Samson. So it's a lot of money that we're talking here. And so of course it goes missing, and the mother is understandably upset about this. She's cursing, and she's telling her son about it, and there's this whole drama about the missing silver. And so Micah admits, I took it. I'm the one who took it. Settle down. And so his mother calls him blessed for owning up to it, for revealing that he had taken it, for easing her feelings of consternation for having lost or had the 1100 shekels stolen, or whatever she thought had happened to it. He owns up to it, and so she says, "Oh, thank you," basically. And notice here that she is referring to Yahweh. If you look it up in the original, of course you can see here in the King James that the word Lord is all capital, but if you go back to the original language, it is Yahweh here that's being talked about. So this is a woman of the tribe of Ephraim. She is an Israelite. She does know who Yahweh is, and she does call on him in her regular conversations here. But because of what's going on, because of where Israel is, there's going to be this mixing of their understanding of who Yahweh is, and their idea of worship of him and idol worship. And you're going to see that here in the next few verses. So it says, "And when he had restored the 1100 shekels of silver to his mother, he gave the money back to her. His mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto Yahweh." So he is saying, or she is saying, I was going to give that to Yahweh. Not a problem yet. Okay, there's not any kind of issue here. So she says, "From my hand for my son." So it was going to be a dedication unto Yahweh on behalf of her son. Again, no problems. But then we get to the next part. To make a graven image. Well, go all the way back to the Ten Commandments, right? You shall make no graven image. So her dedication of silver to Yahweh was to make a graven image. So she was trying to worship God, but in a way that was wrong. There's this incorrect method because God had commanded that there be no graven images made. So we can do the same thing today. We can come up with ways that we want to worship God, and some people will say all life is worship, and that becomes very silly very quickly because a lot of the things that we do in our life um, they have no bearing on what God has commanded us to do to worship Him, and some things that we do in life would be uh, would be awful to be considered our sin, the sins that we can commit or whatever, um, or some of the things that we do that are uh, we would might call them irreligious, or we might call them profane, or um, even just something as simple as going to the bathroom. I'm not worshiping God as an act of worship when I go to the bathroom. That's just ridiculous. You have this idea of the profane, the very common. That's what profane means, is common. All of these common day-to-day activities are not worship to God. And then you have the idea of the modern concept of worship, where Vitellius brought in I think it was 660 AD, an organ for the first time. And then you have in the 1500s, people were talking about having pianos and organs and stuff. And even the reformers, the founders of the various denominations of the Reformation, hate mechanical instruments, but they were brought in eventually and became very commonplace. And so today we not only have a piano in almost every denomination out there, but we have rock bands and concerts, and it's this big production, and it's these people who are worshiping how they think they ought to. And that's what this woman is here doing. She wants to worship Yahweh. She's talking about Yahweh. She's expressing, hey, I'm going to dedicate this silver to Yahweh for your sake, son. But then she does it in a way that is incorrect, is a violation of the will of God. And she makes a graven image, a molten image, and then she says that I will restore it to you. In other words, I'm going to go have this made for you, and then I'm going to give it to you. So the silver was eventually going to be his anyway. And so you can see here that there isn't anything that the woman was like, how dare you steal the silver or whatever. She was originally going to give the silver to her son anyway. Her problem was she didn't know who had taken it. It had been lost or stolen as far as she knew. And then the son that she was going to give it to said, "Oh, no, I took it." And she was like, "Okay." And so she explains this to him. And so in verse 4 it says, "Yet he restored the money unto his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image and a molten image. And they were in the house of Micah." So you have this gift. You have this graven image made out of this silver given to Micah by his mother. And it's for the purpose of worshiping Yahweh, but it's a graven image. There isn't anything explicitly in this context that condemns such. But when we look at what is going on here, we know that what Micah is doing is wrong. He's made a graven image in direct violation of what God commanded. Don't make any graven images. And then you can see here in verse 5, the man Micah, he's now grown up. The man Micah had a house of gods, plural, and made an ephod and a teraphim. Now, ephod is like priestly garments. And the teraphim is kind of a handheld god. If we go back to in the time of, I believe it was Rebecca, took or no, I'm sorry, it was Rachel that took the images of Laban, um, and kind of hid them. It's the same thing. It's the false gods. It's the little handheld things that people would carry with them to remind them of their gods. And so this teraphim specifically is kind of like a little talisman or a little um, molten image of that represented a healing. Like it was, you might think of it as a good luck charm or something along those lines. So um, he had a house of God. So he is worshiping in an incorrect manner because of this molten image. And there are a lot of people today who have images, icons. They have paintings or statues or all of these different kinds of images that they'll say we're not worshiping them, we're just venerating them. Those two, the words mean the same thing. If you look at the roots of those and how they're used and what they're doing, yeah, it's worship. You can call it whatever you want to. A rose by any other name is still a rose. So the veneration or the worshiping of these icons or these images leads to essentially idolatry, and that's what's happened here. The mother intended it for the worship of Yahweh, but by the time Micah grows up, he has a house of gods. He makes this little teraphim to carry with him, and he's essentially setting up his own religion. Okay, and we're gonna see this here in the next verse. But he consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. So Micah has a son now, and remember, these guys are of Ephraim. They're not of descent from Aaron. They're not Levites. They're from Ephraim, and so he's got it all wrong. Everything here, he's consecrated his own priest out of his sons, as opposed to uh, using the approved by God descendants of Aaron as a priest, and taking his sacrifices to them at the tabernacle at this time, and everything about this is gone wrong. But again, it comes from the corruption of the worship of Yahweh that the mother has. So by the time we get to the son, this is the next generation, and then the generation that follows, it's full blown idol worship. Okay, and so Micah has one of his sons as his priest, and it says in verse 6, in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Micah thinks this is the right thing to do, and it's because of the influence of his mother. Instead of worshiping Yahweh the way that God had commanded them to worship, she chose to worship Yahweh in the way that she wanted to worship him, but the way that she thought was right, and it led her son into idolatry. The same thing happens today. When people veer from what we see in the New Testament as worship, and they do their own things, it becomes an idol to them. And this is what mechanical instruments have led to. We have this full-blown entertainment thing. People are doing halftime shows and kicking representations of the Bible like a field goal, and there's just this huge play or production rather than the simple preaching of the gospel and the the worship of God the way that we see it in the New Testament. And it has become an idol for these people. They will hold on to that, and they will, they don't believe they can worship God without all those trappings. And they're doing what is right in their own eyes. I want to go back to this phrase here for a minute in verse 6. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Those days, that word those kind of shows a far offness. There's a looking away in time, and I believe this is backwards in time. This is looking into the past for the writer of the book of Judges. And it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. And I think what you have here is that you have Samuel writing the book of Judges in the time of King Saul, looking back and by guidance of the Holy Spirit, writing the history of what happened between Joshua and Saul. Because we have a period of 300, and I want to say it's 343 years. I'd have to look at my time chart again, but it's over 300 years here between Joshua and Saul, where you had some judges coming in, and there was this kind of back and forth of Israel, faithful or not, faithful or not. Several generations are passing here. More time than they spent in Egypt, in fact. But there's no king. There's no singular leader at this time. Even when you look at the judges were only kind of local. They only helped a few tribes here, a few tribes there, and they overlapped one another. And so this is, I believe, Samuel looking back and saying, back then, in those times, there was no king, and so there was no kind of unified leadership for the people, and because of that, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. You would think, based on the way that the religion was set up when Moses was there, that there was a high priest, the Aaronic priesthood, and the descendants of Aaron, and how that was supposed to be set up. The Levites are supposed to be the ones leading the people in their worship. There isn't a king, but you also don't see any leadership here in terms of religious leadership from the Levites, from the descendants of Aaron at all. It's just not present. Now we're going to see a Levite here in just a minute, but he doesn't. It shows that he doesn't do what he should have done, and so there's no leadership at all for these people other than just some very local, very non-active kind of just go along to get along kind of leadership. There's just nothing here. They're just kind of existing and doing what's fun, doing what's right as they see it, and it's not good. Okay. So when we get to verse 7, it says, and there was a young man, and I'm going to emphasize this idea, he was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah. So that means that he was kind of related. There was this association. The children of Israel would marry across tribes and stuff. They couldn't do a lot of interbreeding, so they tried to go from tribe to tribe. He's of the family of Judah, but he's a Levite, so he's descended from Levi, but he's of the family of Judah. And I know that might seem confusing, but I think what you have here is this descendant of Levi, who is in the place of the kingdom of Judah, or the tribe of Judah. He's out of Bethlehem, which I think is the name of the town, but Bethlehem, Judah is kind of it's like saying Houston, Texas. Bethlehem, Judah is Houston, Texas. If we think of Judah as a state, Bethlehem is a city in that state. He's of that region. That's where he's from, but he's actually a Levite. He's a descendant of Levi. And so he sojourns in that place. I mean, he's traveling, he's journeying there, and he's the idea of sojourning is more than just I'm taking a trip. It's that he goes and is there for a little while. Verse 8. And the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn where he could find a place. And he came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. So he's out, he's looking for a new place to live. He's kind of going out from where he was raised. He comes to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said unto him, from where have you come? And he said unto him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem, Judah, and I go to sojourn where I might find a place. He's looking for a place to live, is what he's doing. He's sojourning, meaning he is looking to go from his land of origin, to a place where he can live as a new place. Okay, and Micah said unto him, dwell with me. So he hears he's a Levite. He says, dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest. Okay, so Micah is telling this young man to be unto me a father and a priest. And I will give you 10 shekels of silver by the year, a suit of apparel, and your victuals, which is food. And so the Levite went in. So here's the problem that we face. This is a Levite. We don't know if he is a descendant of Aaron. He is a young man. We don't know anything about him as it pertains to the priesthood. We know that not all Levites were priests. We know that a lot of the Levites were more support staff for the priesthood, for the sons of Aaron. So we aren't told anything other than he's a Levite, but here he has an opportunity to be a priest, 10 shekels of silver every year. And by that, you could, like, that's a yearly wage, 10 shekels of silver. So going back up to the 1,100 shekels of silver and the 200 used to make the molten image, you know that's a lot of money. And then a suit of apparel and food, so room and board. And then he's going to go be a priest for just this family. The Levites, the sons of Aaron, were not priests for any given family. They were for the people. They served the people. But here this young Levite is going in to be a priest for this one household. And it says that the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was unto him as one of his sons. So Micah is a man who already has sons. He calls in this young man and says, be unto me a father. But then he treats him as one of his sons. So there's this whole power struggle thing going here of, well, I really want you to be as a father to me, but I'm really going to treat you as one of my sons. Who has the authority here? The priest, this makeshift priest, just has no authority. He's there to serve at the whim of Micah and his household. And so there's obviously going to be no correct worshiping of Yahweh based on what all is going on here. The Levite does not correct him. He doesn't get rid of the teraphim. He doesn't get rid of the molten image. He doesn't do anything to get this household back on track worshiping Yahweh the right way. He's just there for the room and board and for the 10 shekels a year. And so Micah consecrated the Levite. Micah has no authority to consecrate a Levite. There's nothing in the law of Moses about somebody who is not a Levite, who is not a priest, consecrating somebody to be a priest. That's not their job. That's not their purview. They're not allowed to do that. The young man became his priest. So you have this young man becoming this priest. And this kind of goes into the thought, kind of like when we looked into the New Testament of elders, that they're not supposed to be novices. And part of the reason they're not supposed to be novices is so that they're not led about by their immaturity, by every new thing that comes along. And new people tend to be less educated in the truth. They're babes in Christ. They're new to the faith. They just don't have the wisdom that comes often with age. And so here you have a young man who is a Levite that allows himself very easily to be talked into becoming a priest for this household. And it's just error upon error upon error, because every man is doing what is right in his own eyes. Okay, so he was a priest in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, listen to this. Micah said, now know I that Yahweh will do me good, seeing I have a Levite to my priest. You see, he misunderstood the way that God wanted things done. He had in his mind, oh, My mom made a graven image unto the Lord, unto Yahweh. That must be the right thing. So he was raised incorrectly. He makes a house of gods, and Yahweh is, I guess, one God among many for him. He makes this teraphim, which is a little kind of mini god or idol to carry with him. And now he's got his own priest, and the Levite being there legitimizes all of the wrong that he's doing in terms of worshiping God. But Micah, in his mind, right, everybody's doing right in their own eyes, in their own mind. Micah thinks, oh, I'm totally legitimate now because I got a Levite that's here, that's come in, that's being my priest, and so God must be blessing me because I'm so righteous. I'm doing so much right to worship God the way that I am, and it's not a testament to anything good in Israel. This is not a story of somebody who's doing right things and wow, we're lifting this up. This whole story is a train wreck. And this isn't the last chapter that we're going to read about Micah and the teraphim and all of this. It's setting up for a longer story, but it's all about people doing right in their own eyes rather than reading the will of God and abiding in the will of God. And that is the true lesson here for this chapter and moving forward for the last few chapters here in the book of Judges. And this is what is going to lead up to the idea of a king. Now, we will get to Samuel, who is truly a judge. He is the actual factual last judge of Israel. He's also a prophet, and I believe he's also a priest of the tribe of Aaron. And I would have to confirm that because I don't remember. But if you look at him, he is the very last of the judges, but he's not in the book of Judges. And so Samson is the last one we read about in the book of Judges that is a named judge. But in Samuel's day, we transition from the idea of judges to kings with King Saul. But right now, everybody's just doing whatever they please. And we see that paralleled here in the broader sense of Christianity, in that every denomination out there is just doing whatever they want. They aren't following the will of God. You can point out very clearly their worship isn't what we see in the New Testament. The organizational structure for a lot of them is not what we see in the New Testament. And the very basic idea of what must I do to be saved is not what we see in the New Testament. They're just doing whatever they think is right in their own eyes, and they are not looking to Christ, their King, who Christ is the King. They're not looking to him for leadership, and it's as if they have no king at all. And so that's where I think we see this lesson from Judges kind of apply to us today. So thank you for tuning in. We will have more on Micah and the rest in the next chapter or so. As always, I look forward to your questions. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation.